Welcome to Complex Kids, Simple Solutions, the podcast where we cut through the chaos of raising a neurodivergent and a complex kid with a practical, no-nonsense strategy. I'm Michelle Shoaidi, speaker, advocate, and a mom of a complex kid myself. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, unheard, or just plain exhausted on this journey, you are not alone. Here we tackle the real struggles head on, share actionable insights, and remind you that small wins matter. Let's dive in and make life just a little bit easier, one episode at a time. You are your child's hero. Today, we're so excited to welcome Amanda Preston, who is a mom of 8. Yes, I said that right. 8 neurodivergent kids and is late diagnosed ADHD herself. She is an author, social worker, founder of a national nonprofit supporting the adoption/fostering community, and she is also the CEO of Deer Creek Family Support and Therapy, which offers support for neurodivergent families and specializes in autism and PDA. She also runs her own parent coaching business and online courses at Amanda Preston Co. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to Complex Kids, Simple Solutions. I'm so excited that you're here. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, I'm excited. We're going to talk about some stuff that I am not ultra familiar with. So this is going to be a very good teaching opportunity for Michelle. So thank you for being here. I'm really excited to hear about all of this. Yes. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you got into doing what you're doing, and tell us a little bit about your life, because that is in itself is a story.
Yeah, so I'm a social worker by trade. I've got 8 kiddos, and I used to work in the nonprofit world supporting adoptive and foster families. So that was kind of where all my focus laid. I was heavy in the neurodivergent world, but focused more on FASD. But then one of my kiddos ended up having some really big behaviors that started coming up that didn't fit into that FASD box. And we started down the road of trying to figure out what was going on. And we stumbled across this new term called Pathological Demand Avoidance, or PDA. And it sort of opened up this whole new world. And I discovered there was a huge lack of understanding and support in that world. So I kind of shifted gears. And so I ended up opening up a mental health clinic. It's a multidisciplinary clinic that specializes in neurodivergence, but with a particular interest in PDA. So, we train all our staff on PDA and how to support families and just fill that gap and offer that support for this really unique presentation. And yeah, that's kind of how I came to where I am. And so I run the clinic. I homeschool my kids. We left the big city behind a couple years ago and started a farm, our homestead. So that's kind of a different life for us now, as we were total city dwellers. And yes. That's who we are.
Well, first of all, let's go back to 8 kids. And on top of it all, mamas, she homeschools them. So really, she is a superwoman, because to have 8 kiddos, run a clinic, and still do some of the stuff on the side, it is just incredible. I don't know how you do it. I might need to have some of your energy to get through the days that I even have here at my house. So.
Some of it's all ADHD related.
Oh, yes, exactly. I know how that is. I've never really been diagnosed with ADHD, but everybody says you have ADHD. And I agree. I think that the people who are doing all these things all at the same time, unless you have that attention deficit, you're not going to be able to focus on just be able to do all these things at the same time is basically what I'm saying. All right. So Amanda, you talk about PDA. So can you tell us about that? I would love to hear, because this is kind of a new term for me. I actually did a little bit of research before we got on this call, but I would love to hear what it is. Tell me about it. And so we understand what this is.
Sure. Yeah. So PDA is basically pathological demand avoidance. Some people refer to it as pervasive drive for autonomy. And it's a profile of autism. So as of right now, there's a lot of talk in the world of whether other diagnoses can have this PDA presentation, like ADHD or that sort of thing. But as of right now, it's just under the autism profile. It's not something that's recognized in the DSM on its own. So people can't just be diagnosed with PDA. But what can happen is when they get diagnosed with autism, the assessor can say that it presents in with a PDA profile. So what it is basically this pathological avoidance of everyday demands and a drive for autonomy. So that kind of, it's a very complicated, complex presentation, but what ends up happening in essence is a child's nervous system gets very easily overstimulated whenever that child has demands in their lives or loss of autonomy or freedom, that sort of thing, and it activates their threat response. And so, as a lot of people know, with many different diagnoses or trauma, that sort of thing, the threat response can put kids into the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And so that's what families are seeing. They're seeing their kids go into these really big behaviors or sometimes internalized behaviors that they were just kind of like, but why? Like, what's going on? Why are they responding this way for things that seem really normal, like brushing your teeth or going to school, or, even going to an activity that they really want to go to. And so parents were realizing like there's something really going on that seems like more than just an autism diagnosis on its own, or more than some of these other diagnoses that are often mentioned. And so actually a lot of families end up getting diagnosed with ODD. That's very common because a lot of professionals don't know about PDA or haven't taken training on it or that sort of thing. And so ODD is a very common one to get diagnosed when, in essence, they really are struggling with PDA. And kids with PDA, they are autistic, but they can present in a very different way with their autism. And so a lot of kids get missed for that autism diagnosis as well. So that's kind of it in a nutshell of what PDA is.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring ODD, because when you mentioned PDA, when we were talking before, I was trying to understand the difference. So can you tell us like what the difference is between ODD and PDA?
Yeah. So, so I will attempt to tell you the difference with kind of the caveat that not everyone agrees that ODD is a diagnosis on its own, if you will. So basically, ODD, I think there's definitely something going on with other diagnoses. So I'll just go off what ODD is sure. viewed as. But ODD is a similar, oppositional defiance disorder. So they are opposing things. They have that same demand avoidance, but it's over things that make sense. And it's over, just in certain areas of their life. So for example, I've got a different child in my family. So one of my kiddos is PDA. One of my kiddos is diagnosed ODD, and she presents in a very different way. So she might not want to do things that would make sense. Like, I don't want to do a chore, or I don't want to go to school when it's something that's not fun, or I don't want to, do this consequence for something. Like it makes sense. And the response is, it doesn't look like her nervous system is breaking down. It just looks more like a defiance, if you will, but it's just in those certain areas of her life. PDA, that pathological piece, is because it's over their entire life. And you can see ODD is not like, you can't control the response with ODD either, or whatever it is that defiance or that demand avoidance, whatever, even if we're going to call it something other than ODD. But with PDA, it's everything. So your kids might feel that threat response happening because someone told them to turn something down, and that feels like a demand to them. They might be in karate classes and it's time to go out the door to go to karate. They really want to go. They really enjoy it. It's something that they love, but it's a demand to get out that door and go. And so they end up having that huge threat response. It could be something like hunger. That's a demand on your system that you need to eat. And so they could end up having a big threat response, going into one of those fight, flight, freeze, or fawn modes because of that demand of hunger or having to decide what I'm going to eat. So the PDA is really seen around all aspects of their life, and it can be for things that are positive or negative.
That was such a good explanation. I love that because the cool thing here is that you have both of them in your house, and the examples you gave, and I was listening to, and I was trying to understand, and even thinking about my son, I think for him is more of the PDA than the ODD, and so that is so interesting, and I'm going to have to look into that a little bit further for him. Now, how would you get this diagnosis? Who do you go to get this PDA diagnosis?
Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest aspects. So there's different views on this. At the end of the day, the autism diagnosis is what's going to matter most in getting supports. The problem is that PDA can present very differently. So some of the criteria in the DSM to get an autism diagnosis are things like, and now you don't have to have all of them. These are just some of the examples, but that you don't provide eye contact or you have a hard time socially. And with kids with PDA, this is common in a lot of other diagnoses, but they mask. And so they have learned how to hide some of those pieces to fit into, their community around them. So they might make eye contact, but it might make them very uncomfortable. It might make them just, crawling inside their skin. It might overwhelm them. So when they come home, they're having, these big feelings around it. They might be able or look like they're having friends, but really they're doing that parallel play, or maybe it's a friendship that parents have set up and it's just something that they're used to in their routine, but there's not that deeper level of friendship. So when they go to get that autism diagnosis, they're not getting it because it presents differently. So even though the PDA profile part isn't required to get the autism diagnosis, finding someone who is skilled in PDA is really my biggest recommendation, because not only are you going to have it in the report as a profile, which I'll tell you afterwards why that's so important, but they're going to know how to look for autism that presents differently, or what we would call in the autism world hard to spot. So it just presents a little bit outside the box of what people think typical autism might look like. So what you want to do is find someone who's aware of that. So PDA North America is an organization in the United States, and they actually have a huge list of PDA aware professionals. So that would be a really good place to start, is looking where in your area of the country. They list people in Canada as well that are PDA aware. So then I would go and seek those people out to have the assessment, because what can happen is they'll go for the autism assessment and they won't get the diagnosis. We actually had that with our son the first time, because that person was not trained on hard to spot. She wasn't trained on PDA. And so we missed the diagnosis, but then we found someone who was for the second time and we got it. So finding someone who is very aware. Otherwise, just finding local PDA Facebook groups is really helpful. And then asking people in there, where have you gone? Who's had a really good experience? That's probably another really excellent way, because you want to know ahead of time, and asking the psychologist questions. How do you find out what's going on internally? What do you do for kids that are going to mask during the assessment? Those are good questions to really dig into how they're going to do the assessment.
Yeah. And are the assessments very similar to the ADOS or anything like that? Or do they have a specific set of questions or what have you, that will give that PDA diagnosis?
So every clinician is going to do their own thing. So most of them still, the basic autism assessment is going to be the same everywhere. They might use different tools. So a lot of clinicians will use the ADOS. Some might use the MIGDOS. They, are using different approaches, but they're still going to do those to figure out some of those basic DSM requirements. And then a lot of the PDA pieces are just going to come from asking the parents questions, things they've seen go on with their children, asking the children how they experience things, that sort of thing. There are a few tools out there that can provide kind of guidance on certain questions to ask and that sort of thing, but there's no tool on its own that just says, yes, this child is PDA or not.
As a parent, when you are struggling with a child and you don't know what's going on, what are some signs that you are looking into something like PDA?
Yeah, so the easiest ones to spot are the kids that are going into fight mode for sure, because they're just the most recognizable. So if you are struggling with kids that are having really aggressive and destructive behaviors and you're not understanding why, and it seems to be around demands, then that might be one sign. So if you're trying to get them to school and they're having, huge meltdowns around it, if you're trying to get them to come eat dinner at the table, or, trying to get them to brush their teeth, bathing and teeth care. Those are all really hard ones and big signs. School refusal is a huge one. So basically just seeing these big reactions. So you might see them, trying to, possibly break things in the house or kick a hole in the wall, things like that. Those are kind of the fight responses. It might be swearing, even though you've said, these are the family rules and we don't do those things. Then the flight might be that they are running away, often running into their room or into corners or in like a tent or that sort of thing, because they don't, have that capacity to manage whatever it is that's going on. The freeze can look like mutism. And this is, they would say selective mutism, but I would argue that, they're not necessarily choosing not to talk. It's just that threat response being activated. But what a lot of parents are frustrated about is their kid might have done something, that they think they shouldn't have done. And a parent will be getting mad and saying, why did you do that? Or, what's going on? And the child's not answering them. And this is making the parent, angry, or like, why are you not answering? You know how to speak, use your words. But they're actually in a selective mutism mode. They're in that fight, flight, freeze, and they're just not able to respond. And then finally, we have the fawn, which is trying to appear overly perfect and pleasing and wanting the, person who is like maybe the caregiver or the teacher, that sort of thing, really wanting to please them. But then they're coming home and having big meltdowns afterwards. Or maybe they are, presenting in that internalized way where they might be self-harming, or they might be presenting with extreme anxiety around a lot of these different demands. So those are just kind of touching the surface on some of the ways that you might start to question, is something more going on? And then if you couple it with the fact that maybe they've got a lot of sensory needs, maybe you do notice that their, friendships are a little bit different than what you would expect for other kids that age. Maybe their speech sounds a little bit different, how they talk to people. Maybe they're rigid and they're talking, some of the more typical autism presentations coupled with this demand avoidance, then you can start to be like, oh, I wonder maybe if that is something that we might be dealing with.
Yeah. Now, can you have PDA apart from autism or from another diagnosis? Can it be the one and only diagnosis for the child?
No, not right now. So there is demand avoidance. So they see demand avoidance of people who are avoiding demands with other diagnoses like ADHD or FASD or that sort of thing. But it's not to that same pathological level where it's affecting every aspect of their life. So as of right now, PDA is only associated under the autism diagnosis.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Now, you talked about all of these things that the children are doing. Now, how do you, as a parent, help them? If you think that they have it, if you have the diagnosis, like what should parents do to support their children?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the main kind of recommended way to support PDA kids is to take a low demand approach. So this could be low demand parenting. This could be low demand approach at school. So basically we are starting with trying to remove all the demands for our children so that they're not having that nervous system activation. They're not going into the fight, flight, freeze. Often by the time people recognize that they're dealing with PDA, their kiddos are often in burnout. So we want to kind of start with getting rid of all demands. And then once their system is more calm, we can put in a few more certain demands that maybe we know that they don't mind being a little bit, like that pressure from a few of them. Like maybe they enjoy karate and they know it's a demand, but they want to go. So we're able to add that back in at some point. You can still have boundaries in your house, but you want to really make sure, like, if I'm going to put this boundary in my house, is it worth it that their nervous system is going to be activated anytime we implement that boundary? So low demand is going to look like it's hard. I'm going to say that most people
have no idea how to do that, Amanda. Like I would have no idea how to just drop all these things and how to just say, okay, you don't have to do this.
Yeah, it's very difficult because so many of us were raised in a time of, authoritative parenting, and there's consequences. And I mean, like, I do workshops that are hours on all of this, and there's other training that's, 100 times better than what I could teach on it. But once you kind of understand it, it makes it easier. But it's basically just trying to not get that nervous system activated. So in a typical house, we might be like, no, when we eat dinner, we eat at the table. A low demand would be saying, no, we're not going to force them to eat at the table. We're going to let them eat. If they need to eat in their room, if they need to eat in the living room, like, we're going to let them, because that's not worth activating their, nervous system to make them sit at the table. A lot of PDA parents end up having to homeschool because their kids just can't navigate. I mean, just think of the school system and how many demands there are in every aspect, from social to academic to rules. It's just a lot in their system. Maybe you're not going to make them bathe every 2 days like you might your other kids. Maybe they're only going to do it every 1 or 2 weeks because that's really all that they can manage. Maybe they're not going to do any chores. It's very hard for PDA kids to do chores and be told to do all these different things. So that's kind of what that low demand approach looks like. Now, it is hard, and it feels like, how are they going to learn anything, and how are they going to function when they get older, and all these things that we're not worrying about that right now. We just need to support our kids' nervous system now. And there are so many adult PDA people out there that can talk so much, like, that have got lovely lives as adults. And they talk about, like, yeah, maybe they do something like have their own business. So they are in control of their own hours, and they are flexible if their nervous system is getting too much pressure on it. But right now, we just need to support their nervous system, because when a child, or anyone for that matter, is in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, they're not able to learn anything anyways. So regardless of whether, we want to teach our kids something for the future, they're not in a position to learn it. So the second thing, like, next to low demand, that I always recommend to families is to just keep learning. So Christy Forbes is sort of the guru of PDA, and she's in the UK, and she has an online course. There's Amanda Diekman, who has a great book on low demand parenting and different books. Self-Reg by Stuart Shank is amazing. There's different, people on Facebook and Instagram that show lots of videos and information, and just kind of like a peek inside how their minds work and how to support children. So once you start doing that education piece and understanding, it makes it easier to shift your lens and understand your child, that your child is not trying to be manipulative. They're not trying to be destructive. And when you can see them in that different light, that they're really just having not a meltdown, not a tantrum, but a panic attack, which is really what's happening, then you can stay calm yourself, and you can stay regulated, which is what they need in that time. And then you can support them better. So the education piece is just so key to keep going down that rabbit hole of learning.
I will tell you that, okay, so I'll tell you a quick story that happened with my son, and I'm kind of thinking of it along these lines. So, he hated going to soccer. It wasn't that he hated going to soccer. He would go to soccer, but it was a nightmare getting him there. And so one day my friend was like, have you asked him why he doesn't want to go to soccer? And I was like, well, I guess not. So I went and I asked him, and he said, because I don't want to wear shorts.
Yeah.
He wanted to wear pants. So I was like, wear black pants. That's fine. It doesn't matter. So that is something that I was able to, kind of less of a demand. He was still able to go to soccer. But I will tell you, as a mom, like, for me to say, no, it's okay for you not to bathe for 1 to 2 weeks, I would be like, this is not happening in my household. I cannot do this, especially when they start getting into, the hormones, and they are stinky, and, that's kind of what we're going through right now with my son. So how do you even, that to me sounds like a crazy thing to do. But are we talking this as like an extreme, I'm hoping, or is this really what people are doing to help these kids with PDA?
No, this is quite common. This is definitely not on the extreme side. And I would say, when you have that PDA, the alternative is so much more extreme. Having a kid come home from school and just falling into the fetal position crying is a huge concern. Having kids, kicking holes in the wall or throwing, glasses at your head. These are all really big feelings and really big things happening. So when you see that, okay, if I can trade some of these big responses for just not bathing as often, or, not having, that's just one tiny little example, but releasing some of those demands for them can just support their nervous system. Because think about it as an adult. If you've ever had any type of trauma or ever been in a situation where you were scared for your life, or, anything, think about how that feels, and your kid is getting into that feeling all the time. We want to try and keep them out of that. So as much as it's uncomfortable and it might not be what it's not necessarily our preferred parenting method or our preferred route. If we know that it's helping to calm their system, and, then things get better. Like, for example, my son had a very hard time showering. It's still a hard thing for him for sure, but where it used to be much larger gaps, his system is so much calmer now, now that he's homeschooling, now that we've reduced all the demands, that now he actually instigates showering on his own much more often. And so that kind of came naturally, because everyone has a capacity for a different amount of demands. So if we are reducing all of them, getting their system, to that safe place, they're going to start being able to do certain things as well.
Yeah. Man, that would be a hard one for me. I'll tell you that. But, I see where you're coming from. I see that, the more you put on them, the more you're going to see those tantrums happening. The more you're going to see the toys being broken. Or we went through a phase with my son that he broke everything. And I really didn't know. And sometimes it was for absolutely nothing. Nothing had happened. He would just go and break some stuff. We're in a much better place now. It still happens, but in a much better place. Now, besides this, just, lower demands, is there like a therapy that helps with the children? Is there something else that can be done that a professional would do? Or is this just an in-home, let's help you, and at school also? But do you know what I'm saying? Is there a treatment?
Yeah, so it's a tricky one. Every kid's going to be different with their capacity and where they're at. But I would say adding in lots of therapies is often not the best approach with PDA, because they are, well, for a couple things, it's a demand. Getting them, either in or out the door to get to these appointments. Having someone in your home is a demand for them to show up and do whatever it is that person's wanting. And then a lot of therapies kind of model their approach around behavioral, modification, where they're trying to change the child. So OT is one of the ones that most people find helpful. Some play therapy if the person is, you know, trained in PDA and skilled in it, then that's really great. Like we have a play therapist at our clinic that does work with kids if they're in a position to come in and handle that. Okay. The number one successful way to kind of get professional support would be parent support. So that's where you find a PDA professional that's going to walk you through that low demand approach, help you figure out how to support their nervous system, you know, navigate the escalation cycle, and then even help if they're in the school system on advocating for, you know, IEP supports that aren't making it harder on their nervous system and lowering some of those demands at school. So that would probably be the best support.
Yeah. Where can parents go for this? Like what, I know you mentioned there's an association in North America Association, but besides that, like, I think you mentioned some Facebook groups, but anything else that you can think of that people can look for this?
Yeah, those are the two main ones. So PDA North America will list, there are a ton of parent support, either like a professional counselor, social worker, or a parent coach. So they have a whole list all over, you know, North America that's really helpful. And then asking in the Facebook group, you can just look up on Google as well and look up. Basically, it would be looking up a counselor or a psychologist and see if they list on their website PDA, or if you add that into the Google, that can help. Those are going to be the two main areas because they're focused. The PDA Facebook groups and the PDA North America website, they're really focused on PDA. You know, I've got a clinic. Well, I've got my clinic where I live, but I've got an online virtual coaching program. So parents can come to me from all over as well. It's amandaprestonco.com. And so I've helped families in the United States just offering that support. The downside of parent coaching is that if you have insurance, it's not covered the same way it is of, you know, with a registered social worker or counselor in your area. So it's going to depend on the family's ability and capacity for who they hire. But that would be another option for families to just get, sometimes it's just helpful to even play it off of someone else, you know, like, this is what I'm dealing with. What kind of changes could I make that might support their system better?
Yeah. It feels like it's almost, let me help the parents, and not really, they don't really even have a lot of, they don't actually have to see the child. It's mostly parents talking about it and helping themselves help their children. So yeah, because it's, you know, we want to neuroaffirm kids that basically we want to change the environment and not the child. So, you know, there's that traditional approach of ABA therapy and that sort of thing, which are not recommended for kids with PDA or any type of behavioral modification, because that's really trying to change the child, and then that causes them to, you know, to hold in really their authentic selves. And so a lot of adult autistic people have kind of given feedback on how that felt to always have to mask or hide who they are or change what they're doing. So the idea is really to try and change that environment, change the things that are going on around the child, rather than the child themselves. Yeah. This has been so interesting to hear about this, because this is new to me. Like, I had not heard of it, but it makes sense, and it makes sense with my child. So it has been great. I really appreciate you coming. If my listeners want to find you, Amanda, where can they find you?
So I've got a couple. Well, my main account on Instagram would be _neurodivergent_bunch. And then my website is amandaprestonco.com. So if they want any support, they can reach out there. I post helpful videos on the Instagram account. So those, Facebook is under Amanda Preston Co as well. So if they want to, you know, come out to those places, if they happen to be in Alberta, Canada, they can go to my clinic, which is deercreektherapy.ca. And then, check out PDA North America, and Christy Forbes, another great place that they should go check out for sure. She is my number one recommendation.
That's great. And we will attach all these things to the podcast notes. Now, I always ask my guests, your last words of wisdom for parents who are dealing with these complex kids that have PDA, that have other diagnoses. What are your words of wisdom for them? Oh,
I think the thing to remember is words that Ross Greene said is, if anyone's ever read The Explosive Child, really great book, very applicable for PDA. But he said kids do well if they can. And so just remembering that the kids they're not trying to be manipulative or naughty or any of these things. They're trying their best. But other things happen, their nervous system, lacking in skills, different diagnoses, that sort of thing. So just to remember that, I think viewing our kids with that lens really helps to go a long way in supporting them.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time coming on here. It's been so informative. I loved it, and thank you for being here, and maybe we'll have you back on at some point and we can talk about something else, because it sounds like you have so much more to give.
Thank you so much. It was great being here today.
Yes. Thanks, Amanda. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for today's episode of Complex Kids, Simple Solutions. If you found this helpful, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And if you're looking for more support, join our Thrive group on Facebook, where we dive deeper and connect with other parents. For more information, be sure to visit www.wisdom4complexkids.com. Or you can also reach me at www.michelleshoaidi.com. Remember, you are doing an amazing job. Take it one step at a time, and I will see you next time. You are your child's hero.